Hi all. I am recording a sort of a blend of what you might experience with either a astrocartography reading, like in its full form with me, or a place-specific micro reading. I'm going to be working with a chart of an individual uh, and like an anonymous individual. Maybe until the end of the video, I might reveal who that person is if you haven't already guessed. But Yeah, we're going to be looking at two locations for this person. So I'm just going to giddy up and get going here. So this is the birth chart of this person. Now, we imagine that it's this person's date of birth, and like we just kind of want to ground into this wheel here and understand the structure and what's happening when we're posing the question, what would life be like if you were born somewhere else? Which is essentially the main question or the founding question of astrocartography or locational astrology. So first of all, we go back in time. It's December 5th, 1901. It's 12:35 a.m. and we're in Chicago, Illinois. And this person is taking their first breath. We imagine this axis that goes left and right across the chart as a sort of indicator of the earthly horizons, the eastern and western horizons, and the rising and setting uh, horizons. So this would be the eastern horizon where things are rising. This is the western horizon where things set. And anything above those two would be in the sky at that moment. This axis is mostly concerned with one's interpersonal experience in life. The rising being like a place of the self and a place of embodiment and projection of spirit. The setting being a place of the other, primary other in particular, people who you're very close with. So uh, that's the first of the two main axes that we look at with astrocartography. The second would be this high point called the midheaven. This is where a planet culminates. So if it's noon, for instance, the sun would be here. The sun would be at its highest point in its daily journey above us. Um, its opposite point is the low point, the nadir, or called the IC by some. I often refer to it as the low point, just to because that's what it is. But I think about this as like the root of the chart, and this is like the crown of the chart. If this is to be an axis of identity, considering like this is where you're coming from. This is a lot of the life that people don't see, more of the private life, the community life, the family life, domestic life, the lineage, things you inherit. And this up here is like more of an expression of like a public offering, a public gift, what you're doing out in the world and how people see you. And obviously they feed into one another. So very shortly, this is like the home and work axis, and this is the self and other axis. And so this person was born in Chicago, and they want me to look at what if they were born in Los Angeles. We're going to examine Los Angeles, and we're going to examine Orlando, Florida. So we asked the question, how would this wheel rotate? Because that's essentially what happens. This person's born in Chicago. We see the arrangement of the planets, most of them down here at the bottom, um, uh, indicating a lot of like internal life and a lot of community life and family life, very generally. So first we go to Los Angeles and we ask that question, what would it look like if this person was born there? Uh, so you probably want to look at the maps and we will get there. But this is, you see like a slight, what is that? Counterclockwise turn, okay? So this asteroid, the asteroid Juno, was on this ascending point, the eastern horizon in Chicago. Whereas here, it hasn't risen yet. It's about 2 hours from doing so, which makes sense because they're 2 hours apart, like in our time zones, which are inexact, but still it's functional. So yeah, this is the new chart, and the way to really fast track um, a sort of interpretation of this is to look at a map, right? So I know that a lot of people have seen, um, Astro maps on maybe astro.com. They have free versions there. This is a professional software that offers a whole lot of detail and specificity that I like to work from, and I find that it's very beneficial. So we're gonna see that this person did a good job of finding a place to do their thing in Los Angeles. We'll see quite a few lines here, and they all mean something different, and they're all carrying a different magnitude, or like a different measurement of power of that line, you know? So it's kind of up to me to, or an astrocartographer and astrologer, to say, like, you know, what line is the most powerful here. Now, the biggest influence in the whole area isn't the closest one, although these are really strong too. But whenever we have a planet that's on an angle, so let's clean this up really quick, and you'll see a line that's indicating Mercury, okay? This is Mercury. So that's telling me that Mercury down here, this guy, is on this low point in LA, or very close to it. Now, this line has about 150 to 200 mile orb of influence, so it's definitely covering all of Southern California. Now, this person's Mercury is particularly interesting, and what it means, let's give it a look real quick. We see Mercury here is positioned in a very interesting pattern with two other planets. So if I look at the moon here and I draw an imaginary line to Saturn over here, we see that Mercury falls directly in between them, and this is what we call a midpoint structure, with Mercury being the focal planet. So the way that those three planets work together is a lot of mental concentration. It's really good for reading and writing and for presenting things in a very logical and coherent way. Really good at just like formulating ideas, making things concrete, doing detail work. So Mercury by itself is about, you know, communication, obviously, and movement of information. But yeah, let's go back to the map, and then we'll see lines around that Mercury, like you'll see the Mercury line along with a Moon-Saturn midpoint line. So now we can find Mercury again. It's right here in a sea of lines. And here's the Moon-Saturn midpoint line very close by. So that's showing, you know, that the Moon-Saturn midpoint aligns with Mercury, as does the Moon-Jupiter midpoint. So this person was born with a moon and with a Jupiter and Saturn conjunction, okay? And so that midpoint with the moon is also on Mercury. And the moon, Jupiter, and Mercury together is very friendly, very warm, and interested in connecting with a variety of people across cultures, really. Yeah, so we get all three of those influences here, which is fantastic. Obviously, Mercury is a strong planet for this person as it's on these midpoints, and to have it on the low point indicates especially like a lot of action, like from the home, like the mental concentration at home, projecting into the workplace. If that person is, you know, expressing out in the workplace or in like a professional public sense. So it's already a really good place for movement of ideas, like communing with other people, while also having a good sense of concentration. All right, so some of the other stuff here is much finer. You see all these like really fine numbers here, these angles. All these lines have more subtle energy than the ones we just spoke of, but they're still quite impactful, just in more specific ways. You know, I can only talk about Mercury itself in so many specific ways. It's actually quite general. But if I look at this far right line here, okay, so this is a line showing me that Mars is in a particular relationship. It's in a 51-degree angle, or 1/7 of a wheel. Here's Mars here in the relocated chart. It's 51 degrees away from the setting point. Okay, and that's 1/7 of the wheel. Now that carries a very particular energy. The seventh is called a septile. It's a subtle aspect, and it's very internal, and it's very focused. Now, because it's on this rising and setting axis, it shows itself interpersonally. So we're looking at Mars, which is all about action, work, and movement. We're looking at that with other people because it's on this rising and setting axis. And then it's in the seventh vibration, which is like, or seventh aspect, the septile, which is all about, focus and sustaining that focus. So this line indicates this is a good place to work together with people on like a long range project, something that you're very passionate about and can sustain focus about. Now this might be a more subtle influence again, but it's definitely strong here because it's so close. Another one is a Pluto. So not all Pluto lines are bad. I don't know what you've seen out there. Some of them are quite rich. So here's Pluto right here, and we can see if I connect Pluto to this rising point, they are 72 degrees apart, and that is in a very, very fine measurement, very tight measurement. So that's one of the tightest lines here. It's right here, I believe. It's kind of a little spaghetti action here. It's hard to really tell which line is which, but it's very, very tight on Los Angeles. This is indicating as that 72-degree angle is often associated with creativity and organic processes. And Pluto is very much about passion, and it's on this rising and setting axis, okay? Then there's going to be a lot of potential for coming across other people who are interesting, artists, perhaps other people who are working to pursue their dreams, pursue something creative, and they're doing it with a lot of drive and a lot of passion, that Pluto energy. It's like really wants to draw from a deep place within and just give that commitment and that passion to something. And that 72-degree angle indicates that it's likely something creative that they're working on, and maybe with you, because we already got the Mars line indicating something like that. Now, another one of the larger influences here has to do with Neptune, okay? So if we go back to the chart, we'll see Neptune is pretty close to a 60-degree angle with this rising point and a 120-degree angle with the setting point. And we call that like a flowing relationship. So I'll say Neptune is in flow with the rising and setting point. So that means Neptune is stepping into your relational life in a very flowing way. This person's Neptune is extremely significant, and we'll be looking more at that later. But it's very, very, very creative and very intuitive, and it's very magical. Yeah, so Neptune being in the flow with the rising and setting indicates relating with people here, whether it's in work or in friendship or in relationship, it's just a smooth sort of relating community vibe with people who are imaginative, who are creative, and who work in some sort of a realm of magic. It's an emphasis on wonder and awe and things that can't be easily explained. Art and faith and all those things. I mean, they have their other sides too, certainly, but the very simple way to look at this is like Neptunian people or people who are creative and imaginative are stepping into your life in relational patterns. It's really, really good for this person in particular. That is a very, very good influence. And I know it's not as close as these other lines, and this line right here, that's the Neptune line. But because it's what we call a major aspect, or like that 60-degree angle and that 120-degree angle, it's very, very powerful and has quite a large orb. So this is another like 150 to 200 mile influence. Whereas these in here, I'd give them, 100 miles max. They're all very subtle and they're not going to reach very far. Now, another one of the major lines is the moon. Okay, so here's a moon line right here. And I know it's not the closest either, but it's very impactful. That's the moon in a 40-degree angle with this rising point. So a 40-degree angle is 1/9 of this wheel. And anytime we get the moon or Venus in a ninth, whether that's 1/9, 2/9, 3/9, with an angle in a place, then that is like the key for community. This is like considered like one of the main community lines that you can have is the moon or Venus in a ninth with one of these four angles, the rising, setting, the midheaven, or the low point. So we can see that this person is, we've already seen it in other ways that they're connecting with other people here, but this moon in particular, I call it kind of like a potluck line, like it's just like a very familial gathering sort of energy where you feel mutually supported by other people who feel like family. Maybe they are actually your actual family. I see a lot of these ninths in people's birth charts and where they're born. But if you can find it somewhere else, then you know that you're stepping into essentially something like community. Especially if you have another planet like Moon and Venus both doing that activity, then you're really, really on the money, trying to find community. So we've got lots of good communication, we've got focus, we've got creative relationships with interesting people, we've got working on long-term projects that you're passionate about. We've got community, we've got warm, fuzzy feelings. One other thing that's coloring the community is this red line right here. And that is showing me the planet Uranus in a 4/9 pattern. Okay, so here's Uranus, and it's 4/9 or 160 degrees from the midheaven. Okay, so really anytime we're working with the ninth in like 1, 2, 3, or 4/9, then we're going to be talking about community in some way. So Uranus is just, electricity, spontaneity, being in the moment. And so if that's coloring your community, then we know that you're going to be running into people here and maybe even co-working with people here because it's on that work and home axis. Co-working with people who have some interesting ideas and are open to like a lot of diversity and a lot of innovation. That's kind of Uranus's MO. So it's really an interesting community that's coming together for this person here. Now, there's still more. There's still more. But for the sake of moving on, if I'm with you and we're doing this reading, like we're going to cover everything that you want to talk about. If you point to a line, I'll talk about it. Okay. But what we're getting basically here is just like a lot of boxes are checked by this location for this person. But they also, for some reason, want to look over by the Atlantic Ocean. So we'll go hop over to the Orlando area. And this is gonna light this person's chart up in a totally different way. Or actually somewhat similar, but it's just, before every recording or reading that I do, I'm doing research into someone's chart and figuring out, who they particularly are and what their patterns are, and so what their strengths are, and also, where they find difficulty. So when I'm looking at places, I'm often like working with how can I highlight this person's strengths or diminish their difficulties in a place. And we see, but the chart that I'm working with right now is somebody who is profoundly creative and just has an incredibly rich life. So, okay, here we are. Now we're in Orlando, or we're in Central Florida area, okay? So I'm also gonna do, well, might have to do that again. So let's do the relocated chart there. From Chicago, here's the Chicago chart. We're gonna move to Orlando and say, what if this person was born in Orlando the same exact moment? What would it look like? So we'll get a slight pivot clockwise because we're going east. And we see that Neptune has gone from right here in Chicago to right here. in Orlando. So Neptune is really, really strongly highlighted here. So now we can talk more about Neptune. And this is when, because this is a really particular pattern, we're going to have to do a little trickery and eliminate all these prescribed lines because it's just a little too busy, I think, to really show. Oh, see, I'm not very good at controlling my mouse, but it's good enough, right? Okay, so what we get here, looking at Neptune, and I want to indicate that Neptune is doing some interesting work with some planets down here. So we see there's a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, right? If I connect them both to Uranus here, that's what I like 2 lines. We'll see that Neptune lies exactly opposite from their midpoint, like where they're right in the middle of each other. So what this indicates is that there is a 4-planet relationship that's occurring with these 4, okay? Now, as we, it can be pretty simple to talk about 2-planet relationships, like Moon and Jupiter. It's like, big fuzzy feelings, or just like big feelings in general, whether they're fuzzy or not, or a lot of food, when we add as many as 4 planets, then things start to get really interesting, the way that energy can meld together. Now, these 4 planets are they involve Neptune and Uranus, and those are 2 planets. When they come together, they create a sense of like excitement and magic, just like a giddiness and wonder. Now, Saturn and Jupiter, when they come together, you get this sort of tempered growth, or this penchant for strategy and planning, organizing. The effect of is like something like you were able to grow things that last a long time. So when all 4 come together, it's fairly complicated, really, but we get a lot of that magic drawn into more of a framework. And so we'll see somebody with like a really big vision, and maybe they have like strong insights into like bigger trends, like bigger cultural trends. So that would be good with like economics or marketing and things like that. Now, because Uranus is involved, there's always like an interest in like what's new, what's happening right now. So if I look at Saturn and Jupiter as something like, strategy, business, planning, and Uranus, those together, then there's often like maybe you can find some success in working with something that is new, or like ignites an excitement in people. When we do the same with Neptune, it's really about putting a form on like a grand vision, like a grand magical vision. So, wow, I mean, all 4 together, you get someone who's deeply intuitive, probably picks up all sorts of ideas flowing through all the time that are really, really good ideas. They probably don't have the ability to do them all. So they actually need people. They need helpers, a lot of helpers. This is a very, very interesting pattern. Okay, so what do we know is in Orlando, this pattern is really, really highlighted because Neptune is right here on the midheaven very, very tightly. And just by itself, Neptune on the midheaven is not necessarily something that is super attractive for like a long-term stay. It's typically something like a place that you find very magical, a place that you dream about going, that you've always fantasized about. and just has a sort of mystique to it. But because this person's Neptune is involved in a very intricate pattern in their birth chart, we know that it's more than that. Now, and it's probably going to, okay, so here it is, Neptune. We've got the Jupiter-Uranus midpoint, Saturn-Uranus midpoint. They're all, like, these three red lines are all part of the same pattern. It's like intuitive, creative, sees things in a really big scale, wants to do things in a big way, but in such a way that they will last. You know, it's not just like woohoo, let's go, let's do it. It's very much like a lasting impact sort of energy, and a very just huge, just really, really big energy. Now, Neptune is further complicated here because we see that it steps into a 90-degree angle with the rising point of the chart, and that line is right here. Okay, so that might show that some of this Neptune stuff is like, you know, maybe a little bit over dreamy. You know, maybe it's hard to accomplish all these dreams here. You're gonna need some help for sure. This is a really complicated place for this person, but also it's on fire. We see a Venus line here. This is a Venus in a flow, that kind of 60 degree, 120 degree flow with the low point and the midheaven. And that indicates something like living like a beautiful life here. Like beauty becomes very important for this person. And just like making things beautiful, feeling beautiful, you know, wearing your best clothes, or just like a lot of it is about the external appearance. Um, we have the sun in a 1/5 angle with the midheaven or the high point of the chart. And or wait, no, that's actually indicating a 1/5 angle with the rising point. Yeah, uh, which is good. It's good for that 1/5 being like a creative energy, that organic flow energy. It's good. It's good for developing, you know, a sense of personal growth and evolution, not necessarily in a linear way, but in like an organic way, through other people. You know, it's more of an interpersonal experience thing where you're meeting other artists, perhaps. There's a Pluto line that's in a 7th aspect, and that indicates a lot of drive and focus for something really, really important to you. It wants to dig really deep uh, because it's such an internal, that like 51 degree or 7th angle is such an internal energy. That feels like it wants to look down, look under, and see underlying motives. Maybe think about how we can possibly evolve things. Okay. Now, there's something going on in this person's chart as well that really speaks to their creative ability, and that is another point that's highlighted here. Okay, so my planets, we're going to be looking at another 4-planet pattern involving, let's get a different color, Saturn and the Sun. Okay, I'm connecting Saturn with the Sun, and I'm going to connect Venus to Mercury. Okay, so what we get is 2 parallel lines, okay? And if I were to start at this corner and go, you know, to the center, to like that shared point, that shared midpoint between the 4 planets from both sides, we get like an isosceles triangle. Or if I were to, anyway, it's a very it's a very interesting form of sacred geometry in the chart. And the way that works for this person is like the Sun Saturn midpoint is so tightly exactly conjunct the Mercury Venus midpoint. There is no space between them. So this is a very, very fine. You have to be born at this minute for this to be occurring. You know, this is not something that happens often. And we're not often so lucky to take our first breaths at such a minute. What it indicates is these four planets working together inextricably, and that is a really strong sense of artistic design. Like this person has the ability to see things up here and make them real, and even a knack for seeing like overarching themes in a story. So it's like Venus and Mercury are often very literary when they get together. When they get together with Saturn, there's typically like a penchant to understand structure as in structuring something that's very beautiful, and very efficient, and it makes sense, and there's no extra, you know. It's like it comes out like what you create doesn't need to be edited because it's already like there. It's all the essentials are there. This is a very strong pattern for somebody who's a designer or a creator or a writer. Um, this, if they get the proper training, then this is going to be a major gift. So where is the point of this triangle? You see, it's really, really close to the low point here. Okay. Now those lines are so tight that they just make one line here. Sun, Saturn, Mercury, Venus, and it's one line. It's right here. I took the measurement. It's 140 miles from Orlando, which is like right on the cusp of being like in the orb of influence. But either way, if I'm looking at this person's chart, I want to highlight this pattern. I want to be like, look, this is one of your major strengths, and it's probably a really big deal in your life, so let's highlight it somewhere. I like it not being super close, but close enough to have an influence, because this is already a really powerful pattern for this person. Now, if I were to pick, if I were to be forced to pick between like the Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter pattern and this four planet pattern, I favor this one because this Neptune one is just a little bit, it's a little bit more intense and it's a little bit less grounded. So living right on it, it would give me some pause. Certainly, I would probably caution that. And we'll see too, there's some other lines that give me some caution here, particularly this one. All right. So that is the midpoint of Saturn and Pluto. All right, here is Saturn. Down here, we've talked about it a few times now. And here's Pluto up here. Now you can see their midpoint is the setting point of the relocated chart. It's right here. This is where they meet. So usually if I see a Saturn-Pluto line for somebody, I'm gonna say, you know, this is a place where you might experience some brushes with a very lean sort of life, you know, like this in particular, because it's on its setting point, it's more interpersonal, it's somewhat isolating. It's not, there's like a lot of obligation or something like that. Like you don't, it's not a lot of friendship, even though there's some other lines here that would indicate community, particularly this red one right here is a community line. It's the moon in the form of a ninth. Again, this Saturn-Pluto one is closer, and it definitely is a line of caution that I would be very hesitant to set up camp nearby. You know, it's just it really makes you break life down to some of the essentials of you know what you really need. And the thing is, like, there's so many other really good lines here. There's so much incredible energy that maybe it'll outweigh this other one, but you can't get rid of this other one. You can't get rid of the Saturn Pluto. But there's so much going on here. It's a very full picture. A lot like LA, and that's very full. You know, there's a lot of boxes are checked. But here, there's some stuff that's a little bit worrisome too. And so for that reason, I would more recommend this place as the place to visit. If you really want to visit, like this is a place where maybe it wouldn't be a good idea for you to live. just because of that Saturn Pluto thing. If it's important to you to have that community and those and like a lot of people around you and feel free in the way that you are being, feel like you can be yourself, then this is not. This just feels really limiting. Okay, so that's. I'm gonna leave it at that. And I guess now is a good time to say like that you probably, I mean, look, we're looking at LA and Orlando, so you might have figured out there's a connection between the two places. Um, and that connection is the Disney, Disneyland and Disney World. Um, so apparently this guy Walt Disney was pretty good at creating stuff. I think he's like nominated for the most Academy Awards of anybody ever, if you take stock in that. And he's had a gigantic influence um, on on American and world culture. Now he set up from what I like just skimmed, like he set up in LA or in Anaheim, right? Disneyland, and that was like the first theme park around like this whole inner world that had been expressed through him and his organization. Um, and then he's born in 1901. In 1965, they the Disney organization announced the plan. Like he had gone and visited the Orlando area. They had picked out all this land and had gathered it all. They had been picking up huge plots of land. And in 1965, they formally announced the plan to like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to build a gigantic complex, and it's going to be unlike anything you've ever seen. It was a massive dream, just an incredible dream that they wanted to manifest, and a place that people associate with like a magical experience that what's been marketed. Um, and people from all over the world go there. Every time I meet a tourist from out of the country, like they're thinking, especially certain age groups, are interested in going there. Um, Now, the timing of it I find really interesting because it's 1965. Walt Disney is he's not quite 64 years old when they announce it in November. Uh, and then so he's 63 when they announce it. And then within a year, he's diagnosed with lung cancer. He tries treatment and he dies. So there's something about like making that investment. Maybe, I mean, this is a pretty wild connection, but maybe there's something about making that investment in this place in Orlando, which has so much energy that's good, that supports the dream, like living on for a long time and lasting a very long time and continuing to expand and be innovative. They've got like they did Epcot, they did whatever Magical Kingdom. I don't know what's there. I visited when I was a kid, but I don't really remember that much. But it was pretty cool as a kid. Anyway, they did so much all after he was dead. But it's a part of like it's all part of like a vision that originated from within him, and his team, his other people, his close people. But that extra line of Pluto and Saturn meeting up on this setting point, they gave me pause. I'm just like, hey, Saturn and Pluto, they're both definitely sort of those like harsh truths of life slash death sort of energies. Pluto's the lord of the underworld. Saturn's like the grandfather planet, used to be the last planet in the solar system before we knew about the outer planets. He's the last visible planet. So he's kind of like the protector, like the outermost border keeper. Um, and yeah, these two together, Saturn and Pluto, they don't come together in any way that's not rather severe. So them on this rising and setting axis, and him tapping into this place, spending time there, accessing the energy there. Uh, I wonder if there's a connection between that and the end of his life. I don't think that there's a causal connection. I would never ever say that, but there's something about life, when we're living in these magical flows with the planets. You can't escape it. So yeah, Walt, uh, while I was putting this together, I saw a bunny rabbit out my window. So I hope that that's like enough to show that I got his blessing to talk about his chart, and look at these places. But yeah, I hope this has been informative for you. And yeah, I love doing this. So this is how it's done.